The next thing we're going to work on is making this rim. We'll probably end up making all the rims that have gotten votes so far. Right now there's 3 of them, so it'll be this one and then 2 more. This one ended up being a higher poly rim. We will do at least 1 lower poly rim to better fit our car. But we're going to try to make something similar to this one. Came out fairly nice, although it is pretty high poly as well. But we're going to give this one a shot. So we're going to go back to our Lamborghini Gallardo file and just choose a new layer. It's not really important which layer you choose, just choose a blank layer and then press 3 on the number pad, and we're done with this image here. So we're going to go down to our images, and I actually just want to change this to right view real quick. So this very bottom image, just change it to right view and then hide it and minimize it by left clicking on this. And then we want to add a new image and open the image. Go to wherever you saved the image of this rim and then open it. So you should have this image open now, and you can also change it to the right view. So just left click here, change it to right view. So on this rim we can use the mirror technique where we only have to do half the spoke. So we want this spoke to be lined up with this blue axis, the z-axis, so that we can use it as a mirror point. So what we're going to do is just adjust the rotation by holding shift and left clicking and dragging until you get the spoke halfway to the left and halfway to the right of this blue line approximately. So I think maybe that is going to be good here. And then you can also bring this up to center it better. But I think we're going to change this position in a second here. So now we just want to go to create, choose circle, keep the default vertices. It should be in object mode when you add that circle in. And I'm also going to change this from 3D cursor to medium point. Now we're going to press tab, R, Y, and then 90 to rotate around the y-axis 90 degrees, and then S to scale this down. So the reason I want to move this image is to give us a better idea of where this, the size of the circle. So we're going to move this up some by holding shift and left clicking and dragging, so we can get a better idea of how big the circle should be. And I actually got it pretty close to what it should be. So just try to get it close to the correct size. Then press E to extrude, right click to cancel, S to scale it down a little. And then E to extrude, right click to cancel, S to scale it down again until you get the center piece. So approximately that far maybe. The center piece is not too much further. And then just as with the other one, the other rim, we're going to drag this back. Maybe that far is going to be good. And then tab to go back to object mode, go to tools and turn smooth shading on. Tab back into edit mode, press A twice, Control N to recalculate the normals. 3 for side view. And I'm going to select these 2 vertices and press Z for wireframe so we can get a better view of this. As usual, you want to create half of the spoke in this case, since we're going to be mirroring it, and you want to create half of the area between the spokes. So you want to create this area here and this area here. Anything else we do not have to create because we will be mirroring and duplicating and rotating this. So this is really the only area that we need from here out and from here up. So we're going to select these two vertices, press E to extrude, and bring this over to the edge, trying to keep that diagonal line with this vertex. And we want to bring this one over just as we did with the other rim. Instead of bringing it up, we want to bring it over so that the loop cut, when we make one, will continue up this way and curl around down this way. So then we want to select these two, E to extrude, right click to cancel, bring them up. Select this one and G to reposition it. Just do your best to create this curve. And then select these two. You can actually bring this up a little higher if you want, but I guess it doesn't matter. But select these two, E to extrude, right click to cancel, bring them straight up. And we're just going to bring them to the end, or close to the end. Just before it starts curving, that's where we want to bring these two. So I'm going to drag it on the Z-axis, hold Control and snap it to this vertex, and then bring it into position. And I want it lined up on the outside of this highlighted crease line. And then it will continue down this way for this line. So we're going to bring it over here. And it is kind of hard to see, but I think there is another line that goes basically right here. So we're going to do Control R and then left click, right click, because it looks like it's right in the correct position here to continue on with this curve. And we can just do E to extrude and start creating this curve by itself. I want to make 4 points on this curve because I think it turns out fairly nice when you do 4 points. 3 wasn't quite enough. I tried 3 the first time and this outer curve turned out not being the best. 4 is a little bit better, I think. And since it's going to be high poly anyway, we're not too concerned about the vertex count, although I usually try to keep it in mind regardless of which type of model I'm making, just because lower poly is easier to manipulate. It's easier to change the position of vertices when there's less of them. So this one wants to continue down with this, and we want to make sure we have 4 points on this corner to match up with these 4 points. So we're just going to continue extruding with E and positioning points along this curve here. And you can reposition them once you're done if you need to with G to get better spacing and a smoother curve as necessary. And then you can take these two, select these two, and then just press F a few times to fill in this area around here. And we can press E to extrude and bring these over to the center point. So you want to, take it over to this center point right here, approximately, and reposition this one so that it will be at a diagonal similar to this diagonal. That's close enough, I guess. And then what we want to do is curve the area in between here. So we're going to do Control R and then mouse wheel up once, left click, right click, and drag these up slightly to better match the curvature of this area. Now what we want to do is bring these up. So we're going to press E to extrude, right click to cancel, and just bring this straight up. And we can even bring it probably up to here or here. And then add in 3 loops. So do Control R, mouse wheel up until you have 3 cuts. Left click, right click, and then select these two and press F until you have all the faces created. And now we can just reposition these. If you want to, you can snap them to their respective vertex, just like I did. So take this one, grab it on the z-axis, hold control, snap it there, so that it just makes the geometry look a little nicer. And one thing we can do, since there is this crease line that continues here, if we do a loop cut now, if we do Control R, you'll see that the loop cut starts to go up this way. But if we want, we can take this vertex and bring it over here, and the loop cut will continue more in this direction to help us create that crease line there, similar to how we did here. Like, this is continuing and curving this way, so when we do add a loop cut, it would continue to help us give this area right here. So if we bring this one over, it'll do the same, where we can continue this like this. So now what we want to do is take these two, and we can press E to extrude, right click to cancel, and bring them out to the edge. And then reposition this vertex somewhere for now. And we can bring these, well actually I want to reposition this one, so I'm going to move it with G. And then we can bring these over to better match up. You can actually just bring them over to here somewhere. Just making sure that this vertex stays on the outer part of this dark area, or a little bit further in, depending on where you feel it should be positioned. And then you can do Control R, mouse wheel up, and left click, right click, so we get the 2 points here, and just reposition these as well. You can move them together if you want, just to continue having similar curvature. And then select these two and press F until you get all these faces. So that's this area done. And I'm just going to reposition this one with G twice to get better spacing between all these points. I think that's a little more appropriate. So one thing we will notice with these spokes is that you have this crease line, and then, which is of course this crease line right here, and then this other crease line which is further in than this outer one. So these points need to be further in than this outer crease. So I believe we want to take this one, or perhaps these, and we may want to leave this one, I'm not sure. We'll take these for now. So we're going to select this one, then hold Control and right click here. Whenever you do a selection and then hold Control and select a different vertex, it will select the vertices that are the shortest path to that vertex. So since we selected this one, held Control and selected this one, this is the shortest path. So it's going to select all the vertices that we want in this case. It's just easier than selecting them all by themselves. So just select one, hold Control, right click to select this whole area. And then we want to bring these back some. Maybe that much is good. And then bring these other ones slightly closer so that it's a more progressive change from one distance to the next. So we should have this now. And we can add in this crease line by doing Control R and then left click and pressing E. And then in my case I need to press F to flip the red dot to the other side, and just give a relatively decent crease distance like that, and that should start giving us this nice crease look here. And it's also making it look like I need to change the position of these vertices to make for a better crease, or a better curve I mean, because they didn't look so nice when I looked at it. It didn't look the best, so I just wanted to change that and make it a nicer, smoother curve. So the next thing we can see is we have this other crease line that goes along here. So we can do Control R, left click, and if you want to, drag it a little up or down and create this part of the crease. And if you're making the outer part of the crease first, you want to just sort of position these other ones more on the outer part of the crease by using Q if you want, and then you can adjust some of these others with G twice. So that should be fine. And then do Control R again and add in the inner crease. You can use E if you want to make a more even curve here, or an even spacing between the lines. That should be fine. And then we see like this darkness here, and although this picture is not the clearest, I think it's because of this area here would be pulled in some, or be pulled more towards the outer part of the rim. So like this area between these two would be pulled towards the outer part of the rim and be a little bit flatter. So if we do Control R, left click, right click, and maybe bring these down a little with Q, and perhaps bring this down a little as well to fit that as well to make a better curve, and then select these. I believe we want all these, so we want these 5, I guess. Yeah, these 5. And then we can just bring them back slightly. And maybe up slightly. And that'll start to create the darker shading that you see. Like you have this crease line and then this darker shading here. Maybe bring it more like that. And you also have like this coming to a point, and because of the way we did it, we kind of have the same shading there. Because we only move these vertices back, it kind of looks like the shading ends there, just like it does right here. So we have a similar look to the shading as well as the physical characteristics. So now I suppose what we can do before we bring this downward, I think we want to add in another edge loop with Control R, just left click and drag it in pretty close. You can use E then F. It's gonna kind of be difficult because we're getting a lot of loop cuts here, and they're all really kind of piling up on each other. So we're gonna have to move some of these vertices around to correct that a bit. Like this one here really needs to be moved. So if we do, what I did was I used C and then middle mouse to deselect these, And then we'll just use Q to slide the rest of these over some so that they're not perfectly touching this other line, which is bad. Because if they're right on top of each other, when we do the remove doubles command, it's going to remove some of these lines and vertices that we don't want to remove. So you just have to be kind of careful not to remove any of those. But I think I'm going to make this a little bit wider down on this side if I can. It's not really wanting to let me do it. So something like that, I guess, is good. And I'm just going to slide this one away a bit more with G twice, just to make sure that they're not going to get removed when we do remove doubles, or at least to reduce the chance of that happening. So that should be it for that. Then we want another set of points here so we can bring this area down. So we're going to do Control R, left click, and drag it up to approximately where this starts. And then left click again. And then Alt right click on this. E to extrude, right click to cancel, and we want this whole thing to be brought back. Maybe a little further than that. I guess that's going to be good. And I think perhaps that these inner parts here are pulled a little further in than the rest of it. It's hard to tell, but I'm just going to move them in a little anyway. It's not really going to be much of a difference either way. So just select these three and bring them in slightly more than the rest of these. And then press 3 again for side view, or actually do Alt right click to get all these vertices again. Then 3 again for side view. And then what we're going to do is we're going to deselect these bottom ones and deselect these, bring these down to tell the difference between the others. Alt right click, deselect these, and deselect these, bring these over a little, and then Alt right click, deselect all of these, and move the only ones that we have not moved yet with G. And just try to continue this straight line and continue this curve in the same way that it was before. Then what we want to do is try to create this outer area. So I'm just repositioning these to create this outer area here. Previously when I did this, I think I went all the way down to this area, and it ended up looking a little bit off in comparison to the real thing, because there was a little bit of darkness here, and on mine it just seemed like it had a larger area where this darkness is compared to the picture. So I'm going to try to correct that. We'll see how this goes. But that'll give us a smaller area where the darker area would be. And I think that's probably a little more accurate. But looking at this now, I think actually I want to take these vertices. So select this one, Control right click on this one, and bring them in a little, just because I think I've actually pulled them quite a bit too far actually. I think it's more like this. And we can even bring these others back in slightly to compensate as well. So I'm just adjusting the depth until I'm happy with these. because it looked a little bit off to me, but this looks maybe a little bit better, I think. Next, so we can do, I'm actually just going to add this in real quick. So we're going to do Control R and left click and press E and make this area here where this would be, to help to contain the shading and to make this darker area, this small little darker area. Just doing that before I forget. And then we want to take this vertex, E to extrude, bring it down to here. Again, trying to keep this diagonal somewhat straight. And we can connect these two, so select these two, press F, and then Control and mouse wheel up once, then left click and reposition these points along this curve. And then we can alt right click here and then select the rest of these. Press F to make a face to get this area like that. Just make sure it's selected, and then we will press I to inset and B for border. And we're going to do an inset similar to this, but it's actually as if like this part, if you put this part over here instead, where if you took this light shading and you put it over in this area, that's kind of what we're going for, because like last time, like I said, it just looked like we had too much space here, at least in my opinion. So I'm going to try to not follow the reference as much and try to move it up and over a little and see if that helps at all. But what I am seeing is that this curve is not very good, so I want to try to reposition some of my vertices, and depending on how you positioned your vertices will determine whether you have to change the position of yours or not. But I just wanted to make sure that this is a nicer, smoother curve than what it was. So now we're going to go back to face select this face, and we want to create this darker shading that's supposed to go up against this area. But what it actually looks like is that this area here is pulled backwards some, so it would be pulled back like this. But we have to create that area first, and then we'll pull it back. So we're going to press I and then B and do a small area similar to the small darker area here. And then we're going to take this and move it back a little. And then press 3 again on the number pad. Then do I and B. And do another small one, another small inset, something like that, hopefully. And what we may need to do, because we're getting some shading problems, I think what I forgot to do before we do this is to scale it to 0 on the x-axis so that we don't get any shading problems like this, because you can see we're getting shading problems. So what we can do is just delete this area maybe, and then start again, or we can, with this selected, do Control plus and do S, then X and 0 and press enter, and then Alt right click here, Alt and Shift right click on this, S, then X and 0, press enter, and hopefully that will sort of correct it. Okay, that looks a little better, but I think what I did accidentally is go to vertex select, alt right click on this, and this one is supposed to be in line with this bottom one, so just move it on the x-axis, hold control and snap it to this bottom one so that that x value is the same, and you're starting to get that look. Like if you compare it, you get this outer shading right here, which would be this outer shading, just like this, and then you've got that little darker shading, and we've got this little darker shading, and then you have this nice flat area, so this nice flat area here. So if you compare the two, they look at least somewhat similar to each other. And then there's this crease line that's going to go across here, but first we need to start connecting some of this geometry to get rid of all these n-gons. So we're going to take these two, J to join, these two, J to join, and we can take some of these and try to fix some of this geometry. So we can take this one and this one, just hold shift and select these two, press J to join, and you can take this one and J to join, and now we technically have all quads, and it works out okay in this case because this entire area, like this entire area here, is all perfectly flat on the x-axis, so these triangles won't cause any problems. And we still have all quads, and we can still do Control R here and make this crease line that we want to make, so it works out nice. So let's do Control R, left click, press E, and then F if you need to make sure the red dot's on the bottom, and do a small little crease line there. And then we want to alt right click on this. And I think we got some vertices we didn't want. Yep. So we're going to deselect these bottom ones. I just use circle select with C and then middle mouse to deselect. So you should have just these right here. So these would be, you know, it's this point right here, and then it goes back more and in. So we're going to E to extrude, right click to cancel, bring it back more, and maybe down slightly. I don't think it needs to go down quite as far as what this shows from this angle, because on these other angles it's looks like it's more of a straighter shot. It's just the angle of the picture that makes it look like it should be down further, but I think this is pretty good. A fairly decent distance right here. So something like that. So now we have this, and if you just compare the picture to the rim that we have, it looks like it's relatively close to what we have here. So before we create the rest of this, the top of this, I want to make this more circular to make it as close to perfectly circular as possible. So we're going to do that, and we're also going to correct these issues along this area. So in order to do the correction of this circle area, we're going to first duplicate and mirror it. So what we want to do before we do that is delete all these points that we don't need here. So we can just select these three and then press H, and these three and press H, and then select a point here, do select linked, delete vertices, then Alt H to unhide the rest of this, A to deselect, A again to select, change this to 3D cursor. Your 3D cursor should be in the center. If it's not, do Shift S, cursor to center. Now do Shift D to duplicate, right click to cancel, S, Y, and then -1 to scale on the Y axis by -1, which will flip it and mirror it. A twice, W, remove doubles, and I think we may have removed some vertices that we were not supposed to, so I'm going to check first by doing Control Z. And I'm just going to hide this real quick and make sure, okay, so the way to tell if you've deleted or when you do remove doubles, the way to tell if you've removed the correct amount is first to see how many vertices are on the points where they should be removed. Like these center points should have their doubles removed, but none of these other points should have doubles removed. So we want 12 vertices to be removed when we do remove doubles. Any other number means that some of these other vertices probably got merged together when they should not have been. So you have to go back and make sure to make changes so that there is more distance between these vertices so that they will not get removed. So for example, if this vertex was closer to this vertex, when we do remove doubles, they're going to merge together, and that's not what we want. So you have to make sure that there is enough distance between all of these points that remove doubles will not remove anything that it's not supposed to. So now that that is explained, we're going to do Alt-H to unhide this if you hit it like I did. A twice, W, remove doubles. So we remove 12, that's exactly what we want. Control N to recalculate the normals. And what I wanted to do to correct this curvature on the top and make it actually circular rather than just a rough estimate done by me just by looking at the reference. In order to make it actually circular, you're going to hold Alt and right click on this outer point, do Alt, Shift, and then S, and then move your mouse until this bottom number. You'll see it just below my mouse to the bottom left. It says to sphere. It should say 1.0 just like it does now. And when you're moving it, you should also see these points here moving and becoming more circular. So it should be at 1.0 and then left click. And the to sphere command will try its best to make a sphere a spherical shape as if this was continued on as a full circle, which is exactly what we want on this case, in this case. And we also want to do it to these points, so we want to Alt right click, Alt Shift and S, make sure it's at 1, then left click, and these are now perfectly circular exactly as we want them to be. You can do the same with these points here to make sure that this inner circle is a perfect circle. So you can do Alt Shift and S and make sure it's at 1, and do the same with this other one, although in this case we're gonna have to select this one with Alt right click and then Alt and Shift right click on this We could do these inner points if we want, but I'm not sure we have to because it's not really going to make a difference. So just do Alt, Shift, and S and make sure it's a circle. And you should do it on these bottom ones as well, Alt, Shift, and S. Just to make sure all of this is staying as circular as possible. Another thing that I wanted to do is we can see that we have this gap here. And it's actually going to be nice to fill this in. So we're going to select. You can actually, it's probably easier to go to Edge Select and just select these two edges. And then just press F to fill them in. Since we're going to be mirroring this again at some point, we need a center edge just like this, but we need it in this area here. So we're going to do Control R and then left click, right click to make sure we have a center edge so that we can mirror later on. And now we have this bad shading, so to correct that, do Control R, left click and drag it up, left click again to correct the shading. We'll deal with this little problem in a minute. And we can correct some of these little shading issues here. Probably should fix it on this side because this is going to be the side we're mirroring. So we can take some of these points, probably take these three, do Alt M and then at center, I believe. And then take these three, Alt M at center. I'm just going to see what happens if I do only those. And I'm not sure I like that, so we're going to go back and do this. I think the problem here, what we're going to need to do is do Control R, left click and drag this down. And that will get rid of that shading problem there. So that looks okay. We can even bring this vertex back out to line up here if we want, and see if that improves the shading at all. I think that's going to be fine. So all I did was change this back to median point, grab it on the X and snap it to this vertex to see if that would change anything, and it looks fine to me. So that is good. Now that this outer part is circular, we can continue finishing off this other part. So we can Alt right click on this, Z for wireframe, E to extrude, right click to cancel. And in this case, we're just going to bring it forward some. Maybe that much, I guess. We can change it if we need to. Then E to extrude, right click to cancel. Change this to median or 3D cursor. And then S to scale this out. And you can even do Shift X to make sure that it doesn't scale it on the X-axis, just in case. And now we have this outer area. And we can do Control R, left click, and drag this back down to help correct the shading and to get a closer, more accurate representation of what this looks like. So now we are essentially done with this part of the rim, I guess. All we have to do now is in edit mode, Alt right click on these center edges, Alt and Shift right click to continue getting the entire center edges. and then press H to hide. And actually, before we do this, let's just save real quick to make sure we don't mess anything up. So just go File, Save, and then press H to hide these. And we can actually just select one of these vertices on the left side, do Select Linked. And the reason it's selecting everything is we have this center thing to hide first, so do Alt and right click and then press H to hide this center one. Then select the left side, select Linked, do H. Or actually, instead of doing H, do Control Z and then delete this, so delete vertices. Now do Alt H to unhide the rest of the rim. A twice. Make sure this is on 3D cursor and your cursor's at the center. So do Shift S, cursor to center. Shift D, right click, SY -1, press enter, A twice, W, remove doubles, Control N to recalculate the normals, Shift D, R and 24, and press enter. This rim has, what is it, 15 spokes, I believe. Yes, it has, this rim has 15 spokes. So 24 is the correct value. It's 360 divided by 15, which is 24. So that's how I got the rotation value of 24. And now, as usual, we need to go through and merge these at the center. So any of these points that are not on top of each other, which is all of them in this case, just go by and select two at a time. Do Alt M at center. And then you can select the next two and do Shift R. That'll repeat the merging at center process. And just continue on down the line, merging all the points at the center. So select the two pairs, Shift R, or if you need to, select the two pairs, Alt M, and then choose at center. Shift R is just faster, but you have to do Alt M first, and then you can do the Shift R to repeat. So just continue repeating the process until you have all the pairs merged at the center, and you also have to do it down in this area. It's going to be a little more tricky down here because you see we got these two loops down here, so just make sure you're selecting the correct two vertices and then merge them at the center. You don't want to select the wrong vertices, like you don't want to do this, like that's not what you want to do. You want to select these two that are supposed to meet up and make sure that they do in fact meet up by merging them at the center. So now that that is done, we're going to Alt right click on this, Alt and Shift right click on this, Alt and Shift right click here, Alt and Shift right click here, Alt and Shift right click here. And we also, as we did before, we need to Alt and Shift right click on this other center edge and then press H to hide. So you shouldn't have any vertices in the center here, and you also should not have any on this diagonal. And then select one of these vertices, do Select and then Linked, press H to hide. So now we should have all the vertices that are not part of that main slice of pie here. So press A, delete, and choose vertices. Now press Alt H. Shift D, right click to cancel, S, Y, -1, press enter, A twice, W, remove doubles, Control N to recalculate the normals, Shift D, R24, press enter, and now we can just press Shift R to repeat the process until we have all of the spokes that we need, A twice, W, and remove doubles. So, assuming everything went correct, or everything was done correctly, we should have this as the result. So we should have essentially the very core components of this rim looking very nice. The only detail I think perhaps we can fix at this point, or at least that I want to fix, is this right here. Save this real quick, just go to File, Save.